Hey guys, this is Matthew again, and we are going to cover some material for Project 4. So the first thing that I am going to do is I need to come over here to my Project 3 folder. Give me one moment. Down here, Web Design 1, Project 3, and here is the last index file that we were working with. The first thing I need to do, or that I believe that I should do, is I should save a version of this in my Project 4 folder. Open with, brackets, and here you can see some of the work that we were doing last time when we were working with images. Now, by the way, your project could look different from this. I'm sort of covering things incrementally as far as the code so that you can have an idea of how to do things. And I'm trying to talk you through it. I think looking at things in a book is one thing, but when you see somebody actually doing it on the screen, it's a whole nother ball game, and it can be helpful. And so in particular, the last Project 3 was all about images. And so here we have a couple images that are rendered on the screen. And these are the JPEG images that I chose, which I got off my Facebook page. I was just using one of my profiles. If you're doing a CV or a resume, I might advise that you use a professional photograph. Even just go outside and have your friends take your picture. Something with you smiling and with your face clear, okay? The second thing that we covered was tables. And so here's an example of a table right there. But that being said, we're moving on to a few new things with this next project. But first things first, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say File, Save As. I am going to select my Project 4 folder in my Web Design 1 folder, and I'm going to save it in this location so I can keep track of it. So I'm going to, instead of it saying index-3, I want it to save as index-4. It's actually sort of helpful to name these. It's not typical that you should do that, actually, because an index-4 in a real world circumstance would actually never exist. It's always just index.html. That being said, what I've noticed over the years is that when folks have many files that are named index.com, or excuse me, .html, they can get confused about which files they're working with, which happens very, very easily. For example, if you have an index file that is living in Project 1 and you have it open in brackets, but you're thinking about material related to Project 3 or 4, when you start making those changes to the file that's open in brackets, but for some reason you have the Project 4 file open on in a browser, so in other words, two different files, and you think that they're the same, you can make changes to your index.html file and you'll be wondering why you're not seeing the changes. And so that's just an example about how essentially you can get your wires crossed when you're doing so much work in such a short period of time in this class, for example. It's also just a very good lesson, in fact. So just me putting that out there verbally, just kind of keep in mind that it's very easy to get your wires crossed with web design. And so my rule of thumb is that when you sit down to work, you close out all the files that you had open in brackets. And the one that you definitely want to be working with that day, you open it up fresh. And that kind of prevents those wires from being crossed. You don't really know that circumstance until you run into it. I've done it myself many, many times, and believe me, I've seen a lot of students do it. So, so it's just a simple lesson. Index-4, we're going to save that in the Project 4 folder. Okay, so we're good to go. I still have my notes HTML file open, which is a good thing, because if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see that we're going to be working with forms here. Okay, forms, and one moment. I bring up this project for folder, forms and quote unquote extra markup. So we're just going to walk through some of these things. By the way, as a reminder, if you look at these questions or prompts before you do the reading, you can kind of know what to keep an eye out for when you're doing the readings so that you can do the quiz more easily. There's a rhyme or a madness to this method. I'm trying to come from multiple different angles to reinforce this learning with you guys so that it really gets hammered in. And over the years, I've found this method to work. So the best that I can do is ask for your trust. And I'm sure it's actually been really wonderful for you so far this semester, because I'm betting that you're really proud of all the work that you're doing. I would be, and I'm proud of you too. So forms. Here is your laundry list, okay? And what you'll notice first off is that a lot of these things may not be applicable to this long haul project of creating a CV or resume, and that's okay. But for this particular project, even if you can't fit it into your resume scheme, maybe just put it below where you left off doing a lot of your resume business and just add on some of these things so that I can see that you've completed the items. And this is your laundry list of things that you need to complete. So basic form structure, text input, password input, text area, radio button, etc., etc. I just kind of I want you guys to get into the practice of doing these things just in case you need to do them down the road as a web developer. It's also kind of amazing what HTML will do sort of out of the box, in my opinion. A lot of this stuff will be rendered by your browser. In addition to that, it's going to talk about HTML5 a little bit. We've touched on it briefly in previous chapters, but it's really going to go a little further into HTML5 land. The truth is HTML5 is just the evolution of HTML, period. I mean, if you look in the beginning of the book, it's going to give you a little bit of a history of HTML. You could also just do a quick search, but HTML has essentially been around for quite a while. And there have been changes that have been made, and HTML5 is the current version of HTML. It's kind of fancy because of the animation functions that are possible. I don't know if you guys remember, but in the 90s, there was this thing called, I think it was the tech bubble. And there were folks just moving to places like San Francisco without any coding knowledge at all. And there are these insane stories of these young folks just kind of getting off the plane and immediately just getting these high paying jobs doing code in San Francisco because websites were relatively new. I mean, this idea of being a web developer, this idea of the websites being potentially commerce heavy, so you can sell products. So there was this big buzz around just hiring young folks to help businesses with web stuff. The other thing I want to mention that I think is very, very important is this section on comments. Comments are really important, in my opinion, because when you're coding, you can sort of make notations to yourself so that you can remind yourself what you're doing or what you're thinking. But in particular, let's say you're working in a marketing office and you have another, I don't know, web developer friend, and you both are working on this larger project. You can actually leave notes for your colleagues in the code, just to kind of clarify things. So that's what comments are. They're not going to render on the page, essentially. What I'm constantly mentioning in this class is that you can actually communicate with me in these comments. You can pretend like I'm your colleague in an office. and you can let me know what you're thinking or what you're doing within your document. It's kind of fun. So comments to me are very, very important. The ID and the class attribute are extraordinarily important because this is basically, in a very subtle way, starting to introduce you to CSS. And we are not ready to talk about CSS quite yet in a big picture way, but the book is slowly nudging that direction. And for the time being, and for this particular moment, the way that I want to frame what CSS is, and by the way, it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. If you're building a home and it's a residential structure, you're going to build things structurally first. So you're going to use a lot of lumber, like wooden lumber. You're going to use, it's going to have a foundation, a concrete cement foundation. It's probably going to have some plumbing in the walls, right? And some electrical things going on. That's all HTML. That's HTML structure. But really, to live in a home, you want it to look kind of nice. And so you can start using CSS to put some gypboard on the walls, and you can paint those walls a certain color. You can put up a certain kind of maybe stained glass window that's going to bring some light into the space really beautifully. You can put a wooden floor down over that concrete slab to really kind of make things feel good. And so CSS is basically the aesthetic component or the creative component to web development. Okay. So we've strictly just been working with the structure, the HTML structure. And at some point, we're going to start talking about CSS. And they're actually two separate documents. And using things like IDs and classes, you can get those two documents to actually talk to each other and communicate. So the CSS document can tell all of the paragraph text in your HTML document to be Helvetica, or to be Times New Roman, or to be Verdana. Or you can tell the entire background of your body portion of your document to be lavender, right? And so that's all happening in a separate document. And again, we'll talk more about it down the road, but right now it's just being introduced as quote unquote additional markup. I'm talking about CSS and HTML being separate things, but you can actually put CSS into an HTML document. It's not suggested, and it's really not even standard practice. You could call it that, but occasionally it is acceptable. Okay. And I think we're going to be touching on that very, very briefly. One of my favorite things, iframes, are so cool because, for example, you can embed a YouTube video on a screen and you can give it dimensions. So that's really fantastic. Very, very useful. Meta, we talked about metadata a little bit in the head portion of the document, if you remember. And you can essentially pepper an HTML page with metadata in the head portion of the document, which will be scanned by, Google spiders. And so you can give folks an idea of what your web page or what your website is about through metadata. And then there are these real just kind of fun special characters that you can render, okay? And so you'll know what I'm talking about when we get there. So I'm going to back up for a second, and I kind of want to go through the book with y'all. So just give me a moment. There's my book. I'm going to open that guy up. And we do need to kind of cruise down to what I think it's chapter 7. Went way too far. Here we go. So chapter 7, forms. Yeah, I love this too, like the way they introduce simplicity with web development. And Google really are fantastic designers, the simplicity of it. And one of I love this page too. Let's see how it looks today, in fact. Google.com, right? Whoop, that's weird. Tom Cruise came up. Okay, look how beautiful and simple this is. And it's just one form, one search location where you can find anything. This is fantastic user experience. There's no confusion about what I should do or what you should do here. It's very simple. You are curious about something, you're interested in something, you type in the terms here, and the world is your oyster. So this is just fantastic, beautiful, simple design. All of this, in my opinion, is pretty self-explanatory, okay? But one thing that they're talking about here, and it's sort of something that's missing from the equation. If you're entering information into a form, that essentially means that that information is being gathered or collected in a database. That database is typically a PHP database system. It even mentions that right here, PHP. We are not covering PHP at all in this course, but I do think that it's worth just mentioning very briefly that all modern websites use PHP. WordPress, for example, uses a database, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in web design too. But you're going to be basically just doing the HTML structure of these forms, and they're going to look very basic, and they're also not going to be connected to a database, a PHP database specifically. So I just kind of want everyone to keep that in mind. You're going to be creating these forms, but they're really not going to be able to do a whole lot because there is no database for these forms to communicate with. And that's okay because we're just learning, right? But I do think that this page is really handy because it maps that process out for you as far as how a database works. And even here, right here, there's this submit button, right? And you're basically submitting information to a database, and the database is gathering the information, and later the webmaster or the web developer would actually be able to find that information. These days, here's some real truth for you as well, because this book is a little bit old. Now, you can actually send out Survey Monkey forms, right, to folks and get information. Or there are even services out there to collect, like there's one is called Constant Contact. You may have received an email from a business before, like somehow you got on their mailing list because somehow they got a hold of your email. And that's what these businesses are always trying to do. They want your email so that they can send you coupons or whatever. But somehow a database captured your email somewhere along the lines, and it was possibly sold to another company. But I guarantee you that your email was captured through some sort of a database like what we're talking about. So a lot of this is very self-explanatory, okay? And I think the best thing to do next, instead of kind of walking through these pages a little bit slowly, what I'd rather do is take a look at the notes page, chapter 7, forms, and here are all the different examples. So for example, up here, they're starting to talk about a simple form. Well, here it is right here on this page, okay? Text input, here it is on this page for you guys to kind of like take a look at. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this notes HTML business actually in Google and scroll down a little bit. I've tried to put everything I feel that you guys need. I'm trying to connect the dots. I don't think it's useful for me to run this course like I think it's better to almost kind of show you the trick right? The HTML trick, so that you can better understand it, so that you can do it under your own power or energy. So chapter 7, forms, form structure. This is where the form controls will appear. I know it's not very exciting, actually. Just like in the textbook over here, this is the result right there. Yeah, it's not exactly exciting. Um, but I just want you guys to go through this process of pretty much trying all of these different forms and methods on your HTML document, okay? So going back here, this is me kind of doing what I'm asking you to do. You might even want to change some of the text if you'd like. I'll leave it up to you. But here you can do a text input. You can actually change even, let's go back here, input. You can change some of these parameters. Like right here, it says username. Let's just say Autobot, just for fun. Save it. Refresh. Of course, it's not cooperating. That's because this is the part that's rendering there. There we go. So you can play with, essentially what I'm saying is you can play with some of this text and have a little bit of fun with this exercise, okay? And also when you do that, that lets me know that you did more than just copy and paste, okay? Yeah, so I put that back. Password input, these are all just methods to the madness that you might eventually have to use, okay? Text area, that's actually pretty handy, right? Although there's no submit button here. Radio buttons are extraordinarily handy. So that's interesting. Let's take a look at this one. So here, calling out the form, right? And I think this is interesting too. The action is directing the form to submit to a PHP. Do you see that? Okay. And then here are the different types of inputs. And if you were a web developer, of course, you would want to add a submit button as well. But as I stated earlier, this is really like the part that's missing, is there's no database to communicate to. So we're almost sort of doing a half measure. We're almost kind of like this is playtime. We're not doing it full measure. Checkbox, drop down list, all this business I'd like to see you guys do. Okay. The next thing I'm going to try on my own file is, let's go back to our laundry list for a moment. So let's say you've done all your button business on your file to show me. The next thing I'd like for you to do is to start playing with comments a little bit. So what I'm going to do, just for fun, HTML comments. See, I can go back to that resource that I was showing you earlier and just kind of borrow this code right here. Okay. Now I'm going to go back into index 4. Right after this paragraph text, I'm going to submit a comment. And notice how it's kind of grayscale. It's not quite bright. And I'm going to change the comment. Okay. Just having a little fun. I'm having so much fun in this class, Mr. Bollinger. Okay. And if I save it, and then I come over, I need to open this file and Google. And notice, oh, this is actually kind of interesting too. Here's another good lesson. First, I want you guys to notice that this is not rendering, and it's not supposed to. Okay. The table, it would appear right here if it were going to render, and it's just not rendering. Now, the other thing that is happening is that guess what is not rendering as well? That both JPEGs are not rendering, only the alt text. You want to know why? Well, let's go take a look at our file folder. I did that over here. So if I actually were to open project 3 index, the images are going to render just fine. But what happened? We saved this file in another location. Where this file is currently saved, there are no JPEGs because the JPEGs are living in the project 3 folder. Essentially, what I'm saying is that the browser will only look for the file wherever you tell it to look. And right now, it is desperately trying to find those JPEG files right next door to the index-4 file, and there's nothing there. And that's why these are not rendering. So that is a very good, crucial lesson, I believe, as far as file management and really needing everything nearby. When you start moving things start to break and not render properly. The website begins to break. Each of these project folders, in my mind, is essentially a website folder, and everything associated with that website needs to be inside there. Now that just, I mean, I don't have to keep any of this stuff. I can just delete it. It's no big deal. And I can even put another comment after this table, but before the closing of the body, right? I understand why the images were not rendering. Exclamation, save. I'm gonna come over here, refresh. All you can see is the table. You can't see these comments at all right? And as a reminder, W3 Schools is a fantastic resource. And there's a lot of code that you can just copy and paste. You know, one of the beautiful and most wonderful things about HTML is how democratic it is. No one is trying to hide anything from you. So, you know, and if you do pursue web development, what you'll find is that there are some extraordinarily talented and focused people out there in the field who don't even have degrees. They just have the initiative to go out there and get things done. I actually really love that about HTML as well, is anyone can do it. You just need to go and teach yourself and build a few websites. And then before you know it, you've got yourself a job. Trust me. Okay, moving on, let's go back to our laundry list. And here they're going to start talking about the ID attribute and the class attribute. But this is kind of venturing into additional markup. So let's go back to our text. That's the next thing that we need to do. We've done all this, you know, form business, great. And unfortunately, we don't have a PHP database to have fun with, but we still know how to do it down the road. We understand that HTML alone can actually do a lot of great things out of the box. That's pretty much what you're learning here, okay? Moving on, extra markup. Doc type. So this is something that usually happens in the header part of a document, okay? And as you guys heard me stating earlier, there are different versions of HTML. And so I actually think, if I remember correctly, let's test this theory. If I create a new document, no. I know that if I use Dreamweaver, see, I don't have Dreamweaver installed on my computer, but Dreamweaver is actually an application that was bought by Adobe. You know, Adobe does that. If they see competitors, they go out and they just buy the applications. But Dreamweaver, when you start a new HTML document, it will actually have a lot of prepackaged doc type information already there. So it kind of knows what to put here. But a doc type is essentially stating the version of HTML that you're going to be using. But here's a secret, folks. The HTML is extraordinarily flexible, and all the basics of HTML that you're learning in this class are definitely still relevant today. And so it's really funny. HTML is a very old language, yet it is very contemporary. I'll just leave that comment there. We talked about comments. Speaking of comments, here we're going to talk about the ID attribute. So an ID and a class are essentially tools used to communicate within the document between the CSS and the HTML. And so that's really the main information that you need to know, I believe, at this time, because I don't want to, we're not quite ready to start talking about CSS full blown yet. We will be very soon, but not quite yet. So, but I definitely want everyone to just know that these IT attributes and class attributes are very, very important for CSS. And again, here is how you associate an ID or a class with a piece of text. So you could create a line of code in a CSS document saying only the text within this paragraph and with this ID or class associated with it, we want that text should be the color purple and it should be Helvetica. One moment, guys. Had to shut the door. My neighbor had the music on a little bit loud. Additionally, these block elements, it's handy to start thinking about web design as far as blocks, period. Okay. Because that's really where we're going. At some point, I'm going to start talking to you about boxes or divs. And these boxes and divs can hold images, they can hold content. And content can be text, but content could also be a form. Content could be a YouTube video. They're basically just boxes or blocks to hold things, okay? And what do you know? Here they're introducing the div, okay? A div is a box. In fact, there is a chapter on this later just called boxes. And so we'll get to that. Right. This chapter is very clever because they're basically just kind of in a subtle way, just kind of throwing these things at you. And they don't quite want you to full blown play around with divs or classes or IDs, but they're starting to introduce the language to you. Okay. But essentially, just kind of remember this: a div is a box. And those boxes can have dimensions associated with them, like 300 by 300. And within that box, you can place an image or you can place text or any kind of content. And then you could have one box floating to the left and another longer box floating to the right. And so you can start to almost kind of create a system of how for example, the front page of a site is going to look. So for example, usually there's a div associated with a website at the very top of a website, and it's going to hold a logo on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, that div is going to hold a menu. Okay. So just kind of imagine these divs within divs, and all of these squares are nested within each other to create a system to hold different types of content on the front page of a website. And talking you through it sounds a little bit funny. Believe me, it makes a lot more sense when I show it to you visually down the road. But just kind of keep this term in mind because it's going to be an important one down the road. And same with the ID attribute and the class attribute. All right. Iframes are very, very handy. In fact, instead of talking about iframes, I can just kind of show you really quickly, but here's the code, right? And it's kind of showing a map result. But let's just give that a shot really quick. It's really easy. Let's go to YouTube. And I'm actually going to grab one of the previous videos that I've uploaded for you all, and I'm going to embed it. In fact, I'm going to embed project 3. Let's do that. So if I click on this, I'm pause it because I don't want to hear the sound of my own voice. That's always a little bit weird, right, guys? And there's an icon down here that says share. And you can just grab the URL. Sure, that's fine. But you can actually embed this. And I want you guys to pay attention to the code here. Take a look at that. Look at, there's an iframe with some attributes associated with the iframe, and a lot of prepackaged information. All I have to do is copy that. Now I can come back to my index-4 HTML, and right below the comment, but above the body closing, I'm going to just paste that code in. I'm going to save it. I'm going to come over here and refresh. And look at that. This image is, or excuse me, this video is now embedded on the HTML page thanks to these beautiful iframes. And there's the opening, and then there's the closing. So iframes are handy in many, many different ways these days, especially now because there are all these companies creating these apps. I had mentioned, for example, SurveyMonkey. And so you can actually embed the link or the actual form itself. You can embed the form on a website. And to take it a step further now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Google Forms, but you can actually create a Google form. You can map out all of the parameters, and it's actually going to accept the results on a PHP database up in the cloud, and then you can review those results later. And so it's just amazing the way web development has changed. You used to have to set up your own PHP server and all that, but now it's almost kind of automated with these services, and Google is one of those services. Constant Contact, SurveyMonkey, and of course YouTube. If we were to go to Vimeo, which is another hosting service for videos, we would be able to do something very, very similar. We can try to find just going to try to find a video. I thought they would just have one right off the bat. Here we go. This is just a random video. And look, here's the share icon. And here is the iframe. You need all of it. So I'm going to copy. Yeah, here we go. So I'm going to copy all of that. Come back. I'm going to add another iframe below. Let's see how it looks. Let's see if we're happy with it. Refresh. And there it is right there. It's actually next door because I think I told you or showed this to you guys earlier with the photographs. If you wrap this with paragraph text, it will automatically sort of push all this down to the next. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So I just kind of pushed it down by wrapping it with paragraph text. This text right here, you could also get rid of. I don't think you absolutely need that because the iframe actually ends right here. That's the nice thing about knowing a little bit about code is you can kind of start to see what you need and what you don't need. Don't need any of that, right? Save, refresh. Now we just have a beautiful video. Notice how there are some dimensions associated with this video. So I can actually come over here and say 320, okay? And 150 plus 30 is 180, right? I'm just kind of cutting that in half just for fun. So I can make that video smaller if I do the math in my head real quick. Just an example of how to use iframes. And by the way, that is really useful code. Comments are extraordinarily useful. Iframes, you're not going to stop using those things. Even when you're working on a WordPress site, for example, you know, in all of my studio classes, I'm all about process and documenting process. But what happens when you start to really, you know, document yourself, maybe in time lapse form, you working on a portrait or a self-portrait or a landscape painting or something like that, you can upload it to YouTube and then you can embed it on your website. Okay. It's also a way a lot of artists are monetizing or supplementing their incomes by doing this sort of thing, because if you can get enough followers, you can make a little bit of money. And so I'm just kind of feeding you ideas about how this web thing could be really handy for you. Just a few examples. Let's go back to our book. I want to make sure that we're hitting on everything. This is quite common too. You can actually go into Google Maps and you can get iframes that are specific to a particular location so that folks know where a business is. That's something you could get from Google or Google Maps. Metadata is really, this is something that's extraordinarily important, and you would put this in the head portion of your document. That's what it's even telling you right here. The meta element lives inside the head element and contains information about the web page. Description, keywords, robots. I'll let you guys kind of do your research. This is a really good example of how to map out the code. And then all of your future projects can have some metadata associated with them. Author is really important. Not all of this stuff you really need, but on an old school HTML website, this robots thing, I'm always describing them as spiders, but they're calling them robots. If you're working on a website and it's currently in development, you can tell the robots or the spiders to not follow or look at that website. That's what's happening there. Author, you can say, okay, who's the webmaster? Who made the website? Well, student first, last. So I would say one of the more important things, of course, is the title, the description, and then keywords. For example, with my website, I would probably choose art, architecture, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Southwest, painting, drawing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of start to define how Google sees your website through the metadata. This is really fun because there are all these just a variety of characters that are kind of funny. Like a real popular one is the ampersand. But any of the copyright, website, or all the work on this website is copyright, student first, last. But these are special characters, and in order to make those characters, you would actually type in this business. Okay. I did want you guys to just try that. Maybe at the bottom of your website, you can just use the copyright. I mean, I think that would be an excellent example. And then maybe use an and or ampersand somewhere. That covers this video tutorial. I do want to again say this one more time. A lot of the code and tricks that we've discussed and covered in both chapters, really, especially the form stuff, it may not be directly relative to your CV or resume vision, but just show me that you can do these things and then omit them when you upload for project 5. Okay, so that doesn't this is a living document, your CV resume, so it can change through time. Okay, all right, thank you. Bye bye.